It was the kind of morning Jasmine Porter had dreamed about. 14 years old, blazer crisp, shoes polished, her fingers clutched a folder like it contained gold. In a way, it did. Inside was a $5,000 scholarship check, her reward for late night, studying, weekends spent at the library, and every sacrificed social hour. She'd earned it, not because of her last name, not because of who her parents were, but because she'd worked harder than most adults ever had to. This was more than a bank errand. This was her first step into the world on her own terms. The Oak Bank was the kind of place where whispers floated under chandeliers and the marble floor caught every echo. Clients wore tailored suits, staff walked with poise, and everything from the flower arrangements to the ambient jazz was curated for wealth. Jasmine had walked past its glass doors dozens of times with her mother, but this time she stepped through alone. She was nervous, yes, but also proud. She walked to the counter, offered a polite smile, and placed the check in front of the teller. "I'd like to make a deposit," she said, voice steady. Across the lobby, Victoria Hayes looked up. Sharp suit, sharper stare. As branch. Manager. Victoria had perfected the art of silent judgment. She clocked Jasmine's age, her skin, the school uniform. She didn't see achievement. She saw inconvenience. When the teller lifted the check to the light, Victoria was already moving. "Excuse me," she said, cutting in smoothly. "We've had a lot of fraudulent activity lately." Jasmine blinked. "I have the award letter here and my school ID." Victoria didn't look, didn't need to. "We'll need to verify," she said flatly. What began as a simple deposit was now a gauntlet of insinuation. The teller held her, check like it might burn. Victoria crossed her arms, and slowly the quiet murmurs of the bank shifted their focus. Why was a teenage girl being interrogated? Why wasn't anyone helping her? Jasmine's hands trembled. "Can I call my mom?" "No." "Phone?" "Then you wait," Victoria replied, her tone like steel in a smile. Jasmine stood by the marble pillar as instructed, not seated, not offered water, just told, silently, to stay put, like a shoplifter in disguise. Customers walked by, some glanced, some whispered. No one spoke up. Minutes passed, then more. The silence thickened, the humiliation bloomed. The marble beneath her felt colder by the second. She had followed the rules, worn her best, brought her papers, smiled, spoken clearly. And still she was treated as a threat. Victoria's voice floated from the counter. "Make sure she doesn't leave." A nearby security guard nodded. Jasmine's stomach dropped. She wasn't just dismissed, she was detained. But here's what no one in that lobby knew, what no one suspected as they watched her from the corners of their eyes. Jasmine Porter was not alone, and her mother. She wasn't just any mom, she was the CEO of the very institution they were all standing in. And the moment she walks through those doors, this quiet little power game, it's going to erupt. Jasmine had been standing for nearly an hour. Her back ached, her legs felt heavy, but more than anything it was the weight of invisibility that began to wear her down. Around her the world went on. White-gloved tellers smiled at sharply dressed couples. A businessman chuckled with a loan officer in a corner lounge. A family walked out with a new account folder and a congratulations balloon. Jasmine, meanwhile, was ignored, until she wasn't, because when they did look at her, it wasn't with kindness. It was with suspicion, containment, as if she were there to cause trouble instead of complete a transaction. She tightened her arms around her folder. She had done everything right. She'd gotten the scholarship, brought her ID, walked in with a smile. She was 14, not 4, but none of that mattered, not to Victoria Hayes. From her high desk, Victoria ruled the bank floor like a queen with a poisoned crown. She leaned close to the teller, Tom, and spoke just low enough for Jasmine to catch snippets. "She doesn't look like a scholarship recipient. Too much risk. Keep her there." Jasmine's ears burned. Keep her there. She wasn't being helped. She was being watched. When a middle-aged white couple approached with similar paperwork, they were greeted with a warm smile and a "right this way." The contrast couldn't be clearer. That's when Jasmine knew. This wasn't about a check, it was about her uniform, her skin, her youth. It all read as not belonging to people like Victoria Hayes. The shame wasn't even subtle anymore. It was practiced, polished, dressed in policy and manners. But Jasmine saw through it, and she wasn't the only one. A few customers exchanged looks. A mother whispered something to her son, both watching Jasmine as if trying to figure out why no one was helping her. A younger teller, Melody, hovered near her station, clearly uncomfortable. But no one intervened, because who challenges the manager? Who risks being wrong? Jasmine shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying not to look weak. Her jaw clenched. She could hear her father's voice in her head. When you're treated unfairly, you have two choices. You shrink or you rise, but you rise with facts, not fury. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. But she remembered. She started writing in the small leather notebook she always carried. It had begun as a planner, then a journal. Now it became something more, a log of injustice. 17 a.m. Denied phone. Called ET 34 a.m. Victoria escorted white clients with same paperwork. 5 a.m. Victoria spoke with man named Harrison Wells. Folder marked confidential. Unclear context but tone urgent. The conversation between Victoria and the well-dressed man was odd. Too hushed, too deliberate. She'd only heard the name Wells in passing before, but it clicked. Her mom had mentioned him once. Harrison Wells is clever, but not trustworthy. Always sniffing around our partnerships. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. This man wasn't a customer, he was a rival. And Victoria? She was feeding him something, literally handing him a folder, labeled confidential. Jasmine's breath caught. She wasn't just a victim of bias. She was a witness. She had no idea what was in that folder, but she knew it mattered. And she knew Victoria wasn't just prejudiced. She was dangerous. The security guard shifted near her, arms crossed, watching, guarding. She was boxed in, cornered. But her mind was working. She wrote every detail down. Her mother had told her, "Don't ever underestimate what you notice. You're always watching more than you realize." Then came the final blow. Victoria's voice to the guard. "Take her to the back. Make sure she stays there." Jasmine's chest tightened. She wasn't even being helped. She was being removed. The guard moved toward her, large hand closing around her upper arm. "Let's go," he said. No warmth in his voice. Jasmine's folder nearly fell from her hands as he led her across the bank. Heads turned, eyes widened. But no one stopped it. This wasn't an error. It was exile. They placed her in a corner behind a pillar, near enough to be seen, far enough to be forgotten. But Jasmine wasn't forgetting. She stood tall, back straight, even as her knees trembled. Her mind spun with humiliation and fury. But under that, clarity. This was bigger than her check, bigger than her. Victoria's casual cruelty wasn't just racism, it was corruption, and Jasmine had the receipts. When the guard stepped away, she opened her notebook again, wrote faster, hands shaking but precise. Then she heard it, the click of heels. She turned and froze. Her mother was here, Naomi Porter, Grace in heels, Steele in a silk blouse. She didn't walk in. She arrived. Every head in the room turned. Victoria's eyes widened for just a second before her usual poise returned. "Miss Porter," she said, foci W. Naomi Porter didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She stood still, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Victoria Hayes. The bank seemed to pause around her, as if the air itself recognized a shift in command. Victoria's mask of corporate courtesy started to falter. "Miss Porter," she repeated, "I can assure you." "You'll address me as Dr. Porter," Naomi corrected without looking up from her daughter's notebook. That one sentence hit like a gavel. Theo, security guard near Jasmine, blinked and took a half step back. Tom, the young teller, dropped his pen. Even Melody, who had been quietly watching from the far counter, turned fully toward them. Victoria opened her mouth to recover, but Naomi had already closed the notebook and lifted her head. You kept my daughter waiting. You publicly humiliated her. You escalated a routine deposit into a display of power. And worst of all, Naomi held the notebook up slightly. You exposed something that should never have happened inside a financial institution. Bias. And a betrayal. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I don't know what you think you saw, but Naomi's tone was glacial. What I know I saw is a manager who refused to verify a legitimate check from a scholarship-winning student. A manager who treated my daughter as a threat instead of a client. And a manager who handed confidential documents to Harrison Wells, CEO of Meridian Banking Group, a direct competitor to my firm. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the security guard looked stunned. Victoria's poise disintegrated. That's absurd, she said too quickly, but Naomi had already stepped toward the counter. She pulled out her phone, opened a secure business app, and within moments had logged the time, date, and surveillance reference of the building's lobby feed. Her fingers moved with the confidence of someone who'd taken down bigger empires than this. I will be requesting full video access, she said, and cross-referencing it with my daughter's notes. We'll see how absurd it is then. Victoria backed toward her desk, grasping at composure. Dr. Porter, let's not make this into a spectacle. Naomi tilted her head. You already did. The moment you decided she didn't belong. Silence. Jasmine stood near the pillar, her arms still crossed, but her breath easier now. This wasn't just her mother defending her. This was a reckoning. Victoria opened her mouth again, but Naomi held up a hand. You will not speak again in this building, she said flatly. Because as of this moment, you're done. Victoria blinked. You can't fire me. I can, Naomi replied. As acting chair of the board, the air in the room evaporated. That truth landed with the weight of a falling building, because now everyone realized Jasmine Porter wasn't just a bright teenager in a blazer. She was the daughter of the woman who owned the bank. And this wasn't a confrontation anymore. It was judgment. Naomi nodded to the nearest employee, Melody, the young teller who had shown Jasmine kindness earlier. Please call building security, Naomi said. Escort Miss Hayes out of the premises. Melody hesitated, then straightened. Yes, Dr. Porter. Victoria's face crumbled. She stepped back, stammering. This is a mistake. I've been with this institution for... Naomi didn't flinch. Too long, clearly. As two security officers arrived and began escorting her out, Victoria made one last attempt. Turning to Jasmine, I hope you're proud of yourself, she hissed. But Jasmine didn't respond with hate, just clarity. I didn't do anything wrong, she said softly. That silence, when no one rushed to defend Victoria, was louder than any scream. The bank watched as their manager was let out. Not for a mistake, not for a single bad interaction, but for a pattern. A rot that had been quietly tolerated for too long. Naomi turned to the remaining staff. We'll be conducting a full review, she said, starting today. That includes equity training, client experience audits, and reassigning anyone complicit in discrimination. The words weren't angry. They were structural, transformative. Then she looked at Melody. What's your name? Melody, ma'am, she said, cheeks flushed. You're the only one who tried to treat my daughter with basic decency. I'll be reviewing your performance file, but if it matches what I suspect, you'll be managing this branch before the month is out. Melody's hands shook slightly as she nodded. Thank you, Dr. Porter. Jasmine watched in awe, not because her mother had power, but because she used it, calmly, precisely, and with purpose. The room had changed, and Jasmine knew this wasn't just about her deposit anymore. This was about how people like her get seen or don't every single day. As they walked out of the bank, mother and daughter side by side, Naomi finally spoke with a small smile. You did well today. I didn't feel like it, Jasmine admitted. You saw, you listened, you remembered. And when it mattered, you told the truth. That's more than most adults can say. They stepped into the sunlight. For the first time that day, Jasmine exhaled. Free scene. The fight wasn't over. Not in the world beyond that polished lobby. But it had started, and this time the record would show who really didn't belong. Jasmine didn't know that her story was about to ripple far beyond the marble floors of Oakdale Bank, but the next morning, her inbox knew. It started small, an email from her school principal, then a message from a local youth foundation, then a subject line that read, "Would you consider speaking to our students?" From there, things moved fast, because while Jasmine hadn't recorded a video, someone else had. A customer in the bank, one who had watched the whole ordeal silently, posted a single captioned photo on social media. She just wanted to deposit a check. They treated her like a criminal. Then her mom walked in and turned the place upside down. Within 24 hours, the post had over 50,000 shares. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. Headlines bloomed. Bank faces backlash after teens. Discrimination story goes viral. CEO mother exposes racial bias in her own institution. Jasmine Porter. A name you should remember. Jasmine Porter, a name that once only lived on her scholarship certificate, was now being whispered in boardrooms and shouted on Twitter. But she wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing impact, and that was exactly what she delivered. At Westridge Academy's next assembly, Jasmine stood at the podium, her notebook in hand. The same one where she had once scribbled observations in fear. Now those words were strength. She cleared her throat, nerves fluttering, but her voice was steady. "I'm 14. I went to a bank to deposit a scholarship check. I was told I didn't belong, not because the check was fake, not because I didn't follow the rules, but because someone looked at me and decided who I was. This isn't just my story. It's the story of anyone who's been told they were too young, too black, too different, too not supposed to be here." We talk a lot about leadership at this school, but leadership isn't always about who's in charge. Sometimes it's just about refusing to stay quiet. The auditorium was silent, and then came the sound of truth. Applause. Not the polite kind, the thunderous kind, the kind that means you said what we've all been needing to say. Across the country, Jasmine's story became a conversation starter. In classrooms and boardrooms alike, her mother's company released an internal equity report weeks ahead of schedule. Naomi was featured in a Forbes article titled, "When Leadership Begins at Home." But Naomi only gave credit to one person. "My daughter," she said, "held the line when I wasn't in the room. That's real leadership." Meanwhile, back at Oakdale Bank, sweeping changes followed. A new executive diversity officer was appointed. Anonymous reporting lines were created for customer complaints. Employees were enrolled in anti-bias and cultural sensitivity training, not as a PR stunt, but as a requirement for continued employment. And Melody, the teller who treated Jasmine with kindness when no one else would, she became the youngest branch manager in Oakdale's history. One day, Jasmine returned, this time invited, to speak to the full staff at the bank. She wore the same school uniform, the same blazer, same calm tone, but her presence was different now. She looked Victoria's former office square in the eye and said, "Bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in your hiring, in your tone, in your assumptions. I came here, once as a student. Today I come as a reminder, never again." People clapped, some stood, and Jasmine, she didn't need revenge. She had something bigger, a voice. That winter, Jasmine was invited to speak on a national youth leadership panel. Her topic? Turning silence into change. In her bag was the same notebook. On the back page, a folded note she kept from her mother. "Remember, the power they tried to take from you was never theirs to begin with." Jasmine had once walked into a bank to handle $5,000. Now her voice was opening million-dollar conversations. Her words had become currency, her truth, unbought, unstoppable. And while the world kept spinning, Jasmine knew, the next time someone doubted her right to be in the room, she wouldn't need backup. She was the backup, she was the standard, she was the change. Jasmine Porter didn't just walk out of Oak Bank with her dignity intact. She walked out carrying a revolution. but not one made of hashtags or headlines. The real change began in the quiet, when no one was looking. In the way tellers now pause before judging. In the way security guards now ask why, not just who. In the way a 14-year-old girl taught a full-grown industry how to see what matters. The black and white security footage from that Monday morning shows a girl in a school uniform, standing alone by the velvet ropes. To anyone else, it's just a still frame. But to Jasmine, it's a monument, a reminder. She didn't just stand there, she endured, and then she acted. What began as a bank visit turned into an audit of a system. What started as humiliation bloomed into reform. Jasmine had no press team, no microphone, just a pen, a notebook, and the clarity to name what was wrong, and the courage to say it out loud. But perhaps the most important part of this story isn't what was said inside that bank. It's what happens outside of it, because now, in towns and cities across the country, people whisper her name when they see unfairness. Be like Jasmine, they say. Write it down. Speak it out. Don't let go. Her story is now required reading at Westridge Academy's freshman orientation, and in the bank's new diversity training video, there's no narrator. There's just Jasmine, standing tall in that same navy blazer, looking straight into the camera, and she says, "Respect isn't something you give to someone who looks like you. It's what you offer when you believe everyone has a place." She still has that scholarship check. She framed it not because it wasn't cashed, but because it marked something far more valuable than $5,000. It was the last time the world underestimated her. Now, she's building a life where other kids won't have to fight so hard to be seen. And Victoria Hayes let go from her position. She was later investigated for corporate misconduct. The data Jasmine helped expose led to further accountability actions. Inside the industry, her name will fade from headlines, but Jasmine's won't, because the girl they tried to dismiss became the girl they now listen to. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being underestimated is not the end. It's often the beginning. And join us next time when we meet another hidden hero in the most unexpected place, someone dismissed by status who turns a silent insult into a life-changing legacy. Until then, remember, you are never too small to shake the room, and sometimes power begins in a corner.